Ambassador Kethvar stood at the wide viewing window of Nexus Station, watching the ships arrive. His long blue fingers tapped against the metal frame as he counted them. 12 different species had sent their best diplomats to this meeting. The future of 3-star systems hung in the balance. War or peace would be decided here in the next few days. The Zilithian ambassador had seen many diplomatic meetings in his 40 years of service. He knew how these things worked. Every delegation brought guards, strong warriors with the best weapons money could buy, energy shields that could stop a missile, armor that could turn away laser fire. Some even brought small armies disguised as security teams. That was why the human ship confused him so much. The human diplomatic vessel glided into the station's docking bay like a silver fish. It was beautiful in its simplicity. Clean lines and no visible weapons. Kethvar had heard stories about human ships. They were supposed to be fierce war machines. This one looked more like a luxury transport. "Ambassador," his aide Yextal whispered beside him. "The humans are coming aboard now." Kethvar nodded and moved away from the window. Time to greet the new arrivals. He walked through the station's main corridors, his flowing robes making soft sounds on the metal floor. Other delegates were already gathered in the central meeting area. Everyone wanted to see the humans. The humans had joined the Galactic Council only 50 years ago. They were still new, still strange. Their homeworld was far from the main trade routes. Most species had never seen a human in person. The airlock opened with a soft hiss. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stepped out first. She was a small woman with dark hair pulled back in a simple style. Her clothes were plain but well made. She smiled and nodded to the waiting crowd of aliens. Behind her came her diplomatic team. 3 advisors, 2 scientists, and a cultural exchange officer. They all looked normal enough. Professional, confident, ready to do their job. Then came the guards. Kethvar felt his breath catch in his throat. There were 4 of them. All tall, all human. They wore dark blue uniforms with silver buttons. No weapons hung from their belts. No energy shields glowed around their bodies. No armor protected their chests. Nothing. They looked like they were dressed for a parade, not a diplomatic mission where tempers could explode into violence. "This is madness," Captain Zexlor growled nearby. The Krexmari warrior was built like a tank, with 4 arms and scales that could stop small bullets. Do the humans not understand what is at stake here? Kethvar had to agree. The Dominion Coalition had been pushing for war for months. Their delegates were known for their short tempers and quick actions. Just last month, a minor trade dispute had turned into a fistfight when someone said the wrong thing. That was why everyone brought heavy security. Everyone except the humans. The human guards took their positions around the room. They stood perfectly still, hands behind their backs. Their eyes scanned the crowd without emotion. One of them, a man with the name Garcia on his uniform, positioned himself near the main conference table. Another, called Chen, moved to guard the entrance. The other 2 spread out to cover different angles. Kethvar found himself studying them more closely. They were certainly fit, tall and strong-looking. But so were many species. The Krexmari were stronger. The Vorthok were faster. The Metallic Union had robot bodies that never tired. What made these humans think they could protect their delegation with nothing but their bare hands? Perhaps they have hidden weapons, Yextal suggested quietly. Some new technology we cannot detect. That had to be it. Humans were known for their clever inventions. Maybe they had developed some kind of invisible shield, or weapons so advanced they could not be seen. That would make sense. Ambassador Vasquez approached their group with a warm smile. "Ambassador Kethvar, it is an honor to meet you. I have read your work on interspecies trade agreements. Very impressive." "Thank you," Kethvar replied, bowing slightly. "Welcome to Nexus Station. I hope your journey was pleasant." "Very much so." Her eyes were bright and alert. "My team is looking forward to working with everyone here. This is an important moment for our region of the galaxy." Kethvar nodded. Then he could not help himself. "If I may ask, Ambassador, your security arrangements seem rather minimal." Elena followed his gaze to her guards. Oh, you mean because they are not armed? She smiled wider. I assure you, Ambassador, our guards are quite sufficient for any situation that might arise. Perhaps more than sufficient. That answer told him nothing. Kethvar tried a different approach. The other delegations have brought rather impressive security forces. Perhaps you would like to coordinate with them? Share resources? That is very kind, but unnecessary. Elena's voice remained pleasant, but firm. Our people prefer to handle their own responsibilities. Before Kethvar could ask more questions, a loud voice boomed across the room. Attention, all delegates. Please take your positions for the opening ceremony. The crowd began to move toward the main conference hall. Kethvar watched as the human guards smoothly repositioned themselves. They moved like water, finding new spots without seeming to communicate with each other. As he walked past Garcia, Kethvar tried to get a better look at the humans' equipment. No weapons, no armor, no visible technology at all. The man might as well have been a civilian dressed in a fancy uniform, but there was something else. Something that made Kethvar's skin crawl in a way he could not explain. He found himself looking away from Garcia's face, without meaning to. His heart rate increased slightly. His breathing became a little faster. That was strange. Kethvar was not easily frightened. He had faced down angry warlords and survived assassination attempts. But something about this calm, unarmed human made his body want to run away. He shook his head. Stress from the important negotiations. That had to be it. The opening ceremony began with speeches about peace and cooperation. Kethvar tried to focus on the words, but his eyes kept drifting to the human guards. They had not moved in over an hour, did not seem bored or tired, just watched everything with those steady, patient eyes. Other delegates were having similar reactions. He noticed the insect-like Vex-Thul delegation's compound eyes kept flickering toward the humans. The plant-based chlorophytes seemed to lean away from them without realizing it. Even the proud Krexmari warriors kept their distance. What was wrong with everyone? These humans had no weapons, no armor, no obvious threats. They should have been the least dangerous people in the room, so why did every instinct Kethvar possessed tell him to be very, very careful around them? The ceremony ended, and delegates began to mingle. Kethvar found himself in conversations about trade routes and mineral rights. Normal diplomatic talk, but part of his mind stayed focused on those 4 humans standing silently around the room. Something was not right here. Something important that he was missing, and he intended to find out what it was. Captain Jex Lore slammed his fist on the conference table. The metal surface dented under his blow. His forearms flexed with barely controlled anger as he glared at the human ambassador across from him. This is ridiculous, he roared. The Krexmari Empire has claimed those mining rights for over 2 centuries. You cannot simply ignore our historical presence. 1. Ambassador Vasquez remained calm. Her hands stayed folded on the table. Her voice was steady when she spoke. Captain, we understand your position, but the Free Worlds Alliance has documented evidence of indigenous populations on those worlds. People who were there long before any of our species arrived. They have the right to determine their own future. Jexlor's scales rippled with fury. The indigenous populations were nothing. Primitive creatures who had barely discovered fire when the Krexmari first found those worlds. They had no technology, no space travel, no real claim to entire star systems, but the humans seemed to think otherwise. You speak of rights, Zexlor growled, but you know nothing of strength. The Krexmari took those worlds because we were strong enough to hold them. That is how the universe works. The strong take what they can defend. Perhaps in the past, Elena replied. But we are trying to build something better. A galaxy where might does not make right. Foolish human idealism. Jex Lore had fought in 17 campaigns. He had seen species rise and fall. Power was the only truth that mattered. Everything else was just pretty words. He looked around the table at the other delegates. Most were staying quiet, not wanting to take sides early in the negotiations. Cowards, This was exactly why the galaxy was full of weak races that could not defend themselves. The Zilithian ambassador was taking notes. The insect creatures were whispering among themselves. The plant people swayed slightly as they considered the arguments. None of them understood real conflict, but the human guards understood. He could see it in their eyes. They were warriors, even if they refused to carry weapons. Garcia stood behind Ambassador Vasquez, like a statue. Alert. Ready. His eyes never stopped moving, never stopped watching. Zexlor had fought humans before. During the border conflicts 20 years ago, they were dangerous opponents. Quick thinking, good with technology, but they were still soft compared to the Krexmari. Smaller, weaker, only 2 arms instead of 4. That was why their lack of weapons made no sense. Captain, Elena said, breaking into his thoughts. Perhaps we can find a compromise. Joint administration of the mining operations, with profits shared between your empire and the indigenous populations. Absolutely not. Zexlor rose from his chair. All 2.5 meters of him. His combat harness creaked as his muscles tensed. The Krexmari do not share what is ours by right of conquest. He had hoped the humans would back down. Show some respect for superior strength. Instead, Elena just looked sad. I am sorry you feel that way, Captain, but the Alliance cannot support territorial expansion based on military force alone. That was the last straw. Zexlor had been a warrior for 30 years. He had led charges against fortified positions, broken enemy lines with his bare claws, won medals for valor in combat. He was not going to be lectured by some soft human female about the realities of power. His hand dropped to his ceremonial blade. It was a traditional weapon, carried by all Krexmari officers. The blade was sharp enough to cut through most armor, fast enough to strike before most species could react. The other delegates saw him reach for the weapon. Several gasped. Someone shouted a warning. The Zilithian ambassador started to stand. Zexlor drew the blade in one smooth motion. The metal sang as it cleared the sheath. He lunged across the table toward Elena Vasquez, moving with all the speed his powerful legs could provide. In Krexmari culture, this was called making a point. Not trying to kill, but showing that he could if he wanted to. Elena would duck or fall backward. Her guards would rush to help her. Then she would understand that pretty words meant nothing against real strength. But Garcia moved first. Not moved, exactly. The human guard simply turned his head, looked directly at Zexlor as he charged forward. The effect was instant and terrible. Every muscle in Zexlor's body screamed at him to stop. His charge faltered. His legs tangled. The blade fell from suddenly nerveless fingers and clattered on the floor. He stumbled backward, his forearms flailing for balance. Fear. Pure, animal terror flooded through him like ice water in his veins. His hearts hammered against his ribs. His breathing came in short, desperate gasps. Every instinct he possessed shrieked the same message over and over. Predator. Apex predator. Run. Hide. Flee. But that was impossible. Garcia had not moved except to look at him, had not drawn a weapon, had not made any threatening gesture. The human stood in exactly the same position as before, hands behind his back, expression calm. Yet Zexlor found himself backing away, step after step, putting distance between himself and those steady human eyes. He could not stop himself. His body would not obey his mind. The worst part was not understanding why. Captain Zexlor. Ambassador Vasquez's voice snapped him back to awareness. Are you all right? He looked around the room. Every alien present was staring at him. Some with concern, others with confusion, a few with what might have been pity. His blade lay on the floor between him and the human delegation. He had dropped it like a frightened child. Shame burned in his chest, but beneath it was something much worse. The fear was still there, still telling him to run from the calm human who had done nothing but look at him. Zexlor's voice came out as a croak. He cleared his throat and tried again. I apologize for my outburst. The negotiations are stressful. Elena nodded graciously. Of course, These are difficult topics for everyone. She gestured to one of her advisors. Perhaps we should take a short break? Allow everyone to collect their thoughts? Murmurs of agreement came from around the table. Delegates began to stand and move toward the side rooms where refreshments waited. Garcia picked up Jexlor's blade and offered it back to him. Handle first. Jexlor stared at the weapon. He should take it back. Should act like nothing had happened. Should maintain his dignity as a Krexmari warrior. But his hand would not reach out. His fingers would not close around the handle. Every time he tried to step forward, that same terrible fear rose up in his chest. Keep it for now, he managed to say. I will. Collect it later. Garcia nodded and set the blade on a nearby side table. Of course, Captain. The human's voice was perfectly polite. Respectful, even. There was no mockery. No threat. No hint of victory. Just professional courtesy. That somehow made it worse. Jexlor walked stiffly from the conference room. His legs felt weak. His scales had gone pale with shock. Other delegates gave him worried looks. But he avoided their eyes. In the corridor outside, he leaned against the wall and tried to understand what had just happened. He was a veteran warrior. He had faced down creatures that could tear apart a small starship. Death did not frighten him, but one look from an unarmed human had reduced him to a trembling mess. It made no sense. Humans were supposed to be weak, soft, dependent on technology to make up for their physical limitations. Garcia was not even particularly large for his species. Average height. Normal build. Nothing special. So why did every fiber of Jexlor's being recognize him as the most dangerous creature in the room? The captain pushed himself away from the wall. He needed to talk to his advisors. Needed to understand what kind of weapon or technology could cause such a reaction. There had to be an explanation. There had to be, because if there was not, if humans could inspire that kind of primal terror just by existing, then the balance of power in the galaxy was very different than anyone realized. And that thought scared him almost as much as Garcia's steady, patient eyes. Dr. Yixana's compound eyes tracked the human guard called Chen as he moved across the room. Her instruments were hidden in the decorative shell on her back, recording everything. Heart rate, brain waves, chemical signatures, movement patterns. Data that might explain what had happened to Captain Jexlor. As the chief behavioral analyst for the Vexthol delegation, she had seen many species interact. Her people had evolved from hunting insects on their homeworld. They understood predator and prey relationships better than most. Fear responses were her specialty. But this was different from anything in her experience. Chen appears to be conducting a standard security sweep, she whispered into her recording device. No unusual movements. No threatening behavior. Yet every time he looks in our direction, Delegate Raxnor's antennae flatten against his head. She glanced at her colleague. Raxnor was a brave individual who had served in the Vexthol military for 20 years. He had fought against the mechanical armies of the Synthesis War. Fear was not something that came easily to him. But right now, he was unconsciously leaning away from the human guard who stood 15 meters away. Yixana had been watching similar reactions all day. The chlorophyte delegation kept their root systems pulled tight beneath their mobile pods. The Metallic Union representatives had increased their defensive protocols by 30%. Even the normally aggressive Krexmari were keeping their distance. Something about the human guards was triggering deep survival instincts across multiple species. She needed to understand what and why. Her first theory had been pheromones. Many species used chemical signals to communicate threat or dominance. But her atmospheric analysis showed nothing unusual. The humans were not releasing any detectable chemical compounds. Her second theory was ultrasonic communication. Some predators use sounds below or above normal hearing ranges to disorient prey. Again, her instruments detected nothing. The frequency spectrum around the human guards was perfectly normal. That left more exotic possibilities. Psychic emanations. Electromagnetic fields. Some unknown technology, or something much more basic. Doctor, Raxnor whispered. The human called Garcia is approaching our position. Yixana looked up from her instruments. The human guard was indeed walking toward them, his path taking him past their observation post. She watched her colleague's reaction carefully. Raxnor's breathing became faster. His compound eyes dilated. His legs shifted into a defensive stance without him realizing it. All classic signs of threat recognition. Garcia passed by without acknowledging them. Polite, professional, calm. But Yixana's own instruments were now screaming warnings at her. Her nervous system was flooding with stress chemicals. Her wings buzzed involuntarily. Her vision sharpened as her brain prepared for immediate danger. The human had done nothing, said nothing, had not even looked at them directly. So why did every cell in her body want to hide? After Garcia moved away, she spent an hour analyzing the recorded data. The results were impossible, but consistent. During the 30 seconds the human had been near them, both she and Raxnor had shown massive spikes in stress hormones. Brain activity in the regions associated with fear and survival had increased by over 200%. But there was no external stimulus to cause such reactions. "I need access to the Galactic Biological Database," she told Raxnor. "Something about human evolution. Their predator-prey relationships on Earth. That information is restricted," he replied. "Only council-level clearance can access detailed biological profiles. Then we request emergency access. This could be a security issue." It took 6 hours to get preliminary approval. When the files finally arrived, they were heavily censored. Most of the detailed evolutionary history had been removed, but what remained was disturbing enough. Earth was classified as a high predation world. The number of apex predators per square kilometer was 3 times the galactic average. The food chain was described as unusually competitive, with extreme selective pressure for survival traits. Humans had evolved in what the report called a continuous threat environment. Their homeworld made the Krexmari war zones look peaceful, but that still did not explain the fear response. Many species came from dangerous worlds. The key was in a single line buried deep in the biological assessment. Humanity represents the only known case of intelligence evolving in an apex predator species rather than as a survival adaptation for prey species. Yixana read that sentence 3 times before its implications hit her. Every other intelligent species in the galaxy had evolved from creatures that were hunted. Prey animals that developed bigger brains to escape predators. Herd creatures that needed to work together to survive. Omnivores that used tools to level the playing field. Humans were different. They had evolved from hunters. Their intelligence had developed to make them better at killing, not better at avoiding death. Her hands shook as she accessed more files, scattered references to predator recognition protocols and instinctive threat assessment. Ancient biological programs that helped prey species identify and avoid their natural enemies. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed was terrifying. She found references to classified incidents. First, contact situations that had gone badly. Mentions of panic responses and mass evacuation events. Most of the details were blocked, but one phrase kept appearing in the heavily censored reports. Subject species exhibited extreme flight behavior when exposed to unmodified human presence. Unmodified human presence. That meant the humans everyone met in diplomatic settings were somehow changed, modified, made safe for contact with other species. But these guards were different. They projected something that the diplomatic humans had learned to suppress, something that marked them as what they truly were: apex predators. Yixana's final test was simple but dangerous. She waited until Garcia was standing near the conference table, then slowly approached him. Her instruments recorded everything as she drew closer. 5 meters away, her pulse began to increase. At 4 meters, her wings started to buzz with nervous energy. At 3 meters, her breathing became shallow. At 2 meters, every instinct in her body was screaming at her to run. Garcia noticed her approach and turned to look at her directly. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Terror flooded her system like a drug. Her legs gave out. She collapsed to the floor, curled into a defensive ball, her exoskeleton automatically darkening to camouflage colors. He crouched down beside her, concern in his voice. "Ma'am, are you all right? Do you need medical attention?" His words were kind. His tone was gentle. but her body would not stop shaking. Because on some level deeper than thought, older than civilization, her brain had recognized him for what he was. The thing her ancestors had spent millions of years learning to fear and flee. The perfect hunter. The creature that stalked through the darkness and always found its prey. When he helped her to her feet, his touch was careful and respectful. When he asked if she needed anything, his concern seemed genuine. When he stepped back to give her space, his movements were considerate. But none of that mattered to the ancient parts of her mind that still remembered when creatures like him had hunted creatures like her through primordial forests. Later that night, locked in her quarters, Yixana stared at her data and tried to process what she had learned. The implications were staggering. If humans could inspire this kind of primal terror just by existing, what did that mean for galactic civilization? How many wars might be prevented simply by having humans present? How many conflicts might end before they began? Because one side was too terrified to fight. But there was a darker question beneath those thoughts. If the human guards were this effective at projecting predatory presence, what were the regular human diplomats hiding? What had they learned to suppress about themselves to function in galactic society? And most importantly, what would happen if they ever decided to stop hiding it? She needed more information. Higher clearance levels. Access to files that would explain how humanity had managed to integrate into a galaxy full of their natural prey. Because one thing was now clear to her. The balance of power in galactic civilization was not what anyone thought it was. The real rulers were not the militaristic Krexmari or the ancient council species. They were the quiet humans who had convinced everyone else that they were just another harmless species looking for their place among the stars. The humans who had agreed to suppress their true nature in exchange for acceptance. The question was, what would they want in return for continuing to pretend to be something they were not? Archivist Prime Velthron had not slept in 3 days. The emergency requests for classified information were piling up on his desk. 7 different delegations demanding answers about the human guards. 3 formal complaints about psychological warfare tactics. And now Dr. Yixana's report, suggesting that humanity posed a fundamental threat to galactic civilization. He stood in the deepest vault of Nexus Station, surrounded by data cores that contained 500,000 years of galactic history. Most of it was available to scholars and diplomats. But the files he was accessing now had been sealed since the day humans first made contact with the Galactic Council. The truth about humanity was so dangerous that only 5 beings in the galaxy knew it completely. Now he was about to become the 6th. His long, gray fingers moved across the ancient control panel. Security barriers fell away one by one, each requiring different authentication codes. Biometric scans. Genetic verification. Psychic imprints that proved he was who he claimed to be. The final lock required something more personal, a memory scan to verify his commitment to galactic peace. The system probed his mind, examining his motivations, finding them pure. It granted access to the most classified files in existence. What he found changed everything he thought he knew about the last 50 years. The first document was a report from Admiral Kexthul, dated 51 years ago. The initial contact with humanity. Day 1 of First Contact Protocol. Human vessels detected at grid reference 447 Delta. Standard diplomatic approach authorized. Initial communications successful. Humans appear cooperative and interested in peaceful contact. The next entry was very different. Day 2. First face-to-face meeting conducted aboard the neutral station Gamma 7. Human delegation consisting of 3 diplomats and 2 guards. Within 30 minutes of their arrival, the entire alien diplomatic corps had evacuated the station. Cause unknown. Humans claim they took no hostile action. Velthron scrolled through dozens of similar reports, meeting after meeting, that ended in panic. Alien delegations fleeing in terror from humans who had done nothing but show up and try to talk. The turning point came in a report from Dr. Zalveth, the Council's chief xenobiologist at the time. After extensive study, I have identified the cause of the mass panic responses. Humans are unique among galactic species in that they evolved from apex predators rather than prey animals. Every other intelligent species in our database evolved as creatures that were hunted. Our deepest biological programming recognizes humans as the thing our ancestors feared most, the perfect hunter. This creates an impossible situation. Humans appear to be a peaceful, cooperative species, genuinely interested in joining galactic civilization, but their mere presence triggers fight or flight responses in every other species. Integration appears biologically impossible. The solution, when it came, was typically human in its cleverness. Dr. Sarah Chen, the head of the Human Diplomatic Mission, had proposed something unprecedented. Humans would voluntarily modify their own behavior to make contact possible. They would learn to suppress the predatory presence that marked them as apex hunters. The training program took 10 years to develop. Meditation techniques borrowed from ancient human religious practices. Psychological conditioning that dampened the aggressive instincts that made other species want to flee. Chemical treatments that altered pheromone production. Most importantly, careful selection of which humans would represent their species. Only individuals with naturally low predatory presence would be allowed in diplomatic roles. The warriors and hunters would stay on Earth. It worked. Modified humans could interact with other species without causing panic. First contact protocols were successfully completed. Humanity was welcomed into the Galactic Council as a valued member species. But there had been conditions. Velthron found the secret treaty buried in the deepest archives. The document that had never been shared with the general galactic population. The real agreement between humanity and the Council. Humanity would maintain the facade of being a normal species. They would continue to modify their diplomats and traders. They would keep their true nature hidden from the galactic population. In exchange, they would be granted full membership in the Council. Access to galactic technology and trade routes. The right to establish colonies on uninhabited worlds. And one other thing. Article 7. In recognition of their unique biological advantages, humanity will provide security services for high-level diplomatic functions. Human guards will be selected from unmodified populations and trained to project maximum predatory presence. This will serve as a deterrent against violence while maintaining the fiction that humans are merely well-trained security personnel. The human guards were not just protection. They were a demonstration. A reminder of what humanity really was. Hidden beneath the diplomatic surface, Velthron read through decades of incident reports. Conflicts that ended before they began when human guards entered the room. Wars prevented by the simple presence of a few unmodified humans. Peace maintained through carefully controlled fear. It was the most successful peacekeeping program in galactic history. And almost nobody knew it existed. The archivist's hands shook as he reached the most recent files. Reports from intelligence services across the galaxy. Monitoring human populations. Watching for signs that the treaty might be breaking down. What they found was disturbing. Human birth rates were declining on their homeworld, but increasing dramatically in their colonies. New generations were growing up away from Earth, away from the cultural conditioning that taught them to hide their nature. Military recruitment was at an all-time high. Industrial production focused heavily on weapons and starships. Most concerning of all, there were reports of incidents in the outer territories. Pirate attacks that ended with entire crews found dead, apparently killed by hand. Trade disputes where the human negotiators suddenly dropped their diplomatic masks and revealed something that made hardened criminals beg for mercy. The younger generation of humans was losing patience with the pretense. They were tired of hiding what they were. Tired of modifying themselves to make other species comfortable. And if they ever decided to stop pretending, if they ever chose to reveal their true nature to the galaxy, Velthron closed the files and leaned back in his chair. The delegations upstairs were demanding answers about the human guards. They wanted to know why their people were afraid. They wanted explanations for the terror that humans could inspire. They had no idea how lucky they were that humans had agreed to hide their true nature for the last 50 years. But that agreement was showing cracks. The incident with Captain Jex Lore was just the beginning. Word was spreading about human capabilities. Questions were being asked. Soon, the secret would be impossible to maintain. The Galactic Council had 3 choices. They could continue to honor the treaty and hope humanity remained willing to hide what they were, They could attempt to force humanity to maintain the facade through threats or economic pressure. Or they could reveal the truth and hope that fear would maintain peace better than ignorance. None of the options were good. If the treaty collapsed, if humanity decided to stop pretending, the galaxy would learn what it meant to share space with a species of apex predators. Every trade negotiation would be conducted under the shadow of primal terror. Every diplomatic meeting would be an exercise in barely controlled panic. But the alternative might be worse. If the Council tried to force humanity to continue hiding, they might discover what happened when apex predators decided they were tired of being leashed. Velthron stood up and walked toward the exit. Time to brief the emergency council session. Time to reveal 50 years of lies and careful deception. Time to tell the galaxy that the peaceful, cooperative humans they thought they knew had never really existed. That they had been sharing space with perfect predators who had chosen to be gentle, and that choice might not last much longer. The galaxy was about to learn the answer to a question they had never thought to ask. What happened when the apex predator species decided they no longer wanted to pretend to be prey? The answer, Velthron feared, would reshape civilization itself, because there was one thing the files made crystal clear about human nature. When they stopped pretending to be harmless, they became something that made their current guards look like children playing dress-up. The real question was not whether humanity would reveal their nature. It was whether the galaxy would survive when they did. Elena Vasquez stood at the center of the emergency session, facing 300 of the galaxy's most powerful leaders. Their fear was visible in every movement, every nervous gesture, every attempt to avoid looking directly at her human guards. The truth was out. Dr. Yixana's report had been leaked to the Dominion Coalition 6 hours ago. Archivist Prime Velthron had confirmed the details in his emergency briefing. 50 years of careful deception had crumbled in a single day. Now the galaxy knew what humans really were. "The motion before us is simple," announced Supreme Counselor Thexwan, his voice trembling slightly. "Do we formally ban humanity from all diplomatic functions? Or do we accept their proposal for a new framework of cooperation?" Elena tried to read the room, but the mixture of fear and anger made it impossible. Some species were calling for immediate military action against human space. Others demanded that all humans be confined to their home system. A few progressive voices suggested that this revelation might actually improve galactic security, but most just looked terrified. "Before you vote," Elena said, stepping forward, "I want to address the accusations that have been made. Yes, we have hidden our true nature from you. Yes, our guards are chosen specifically for their ability to project what you call predatory presence. And yes, we are the only species in this galaxy that evolved as apex predators." Murmurs of unease rippled through the assembly. Several delegates moved their chairs further away from her position. "But I want you to consider what that has meant for the last 50 years. How many wars have been prevented because human guards were present at negotiations? How many conflicts ended before they began because both sides were too focused on survival instincts to fight each other? How many lives have been saved by the fear we inspire?" Captain Zexlor rose from his seat. His earlier humiliation had been replaced by cold fury. "You speak of lives saved, but what about trust betrayed? For half a century, you have lied to us about your fundamental nature. How can we ever believe anything you say again?" "Because," Elena replied calmly, "our actions speak louder than our deception. In 50 years of contact, humans have never initiated a war with another species. We have never used our natural advantages to conquer or dominate. We chose to hide what we are because we wanted to be part of something larger than ourselves." She gestured to Garcia, who stepped forward slightly. Even that small movement caused visible reactions throughout the assembly. Delegates leaned back in their chairs. Guards reached for weapons they knew would be useless. "Our guards are volunteers," Elena continued. "Military personnel who have undergone psychological conditioning to enhance their natural, predatory presence. They serve as a reminder of what we could be if we chose violence over diplomacy." "A threat," snarled Ambassador Kreltoth of the Synthetic Union. "You position weapons aimed at our deepest fears and call it peacekeeping." "No," Elena said firmly. "A choice. Every day, humanity chooses to be something other than what evolution made us. We choose to suppress our instincts, modify our behavior, and pretend to be harmless because we value peace over power. She paused, letting that sink in before delivering the key point. But that choice has a cost, and it requires something from you in return. The assembly fell silent. This was the moment everyone had been dreading. The ultimatum. For 50 years, we have hidden what we are to make you comfortable. We have chemically modified our diplomats, psychologically conditioned our representatives, and carefully selected which of our people you meet. We have made ourselves smaller and weaker and less than we are, all to maintain the illusion that we are just another species looking for our place among the stars. Elena's voice grew stronger, more confident. But our young people are asking questions. Why should we diminish ourselves? Why should we pretend to be prey animals when we are clearly not? Why should we continue to hide our nature when it could bring peace to the galaxy? The threat was implicit but clear. Younger humans were growing tired of the pretense. The careful control that had maintained the illusion for 50 years was breaking down. So we propose a new arrangement, Elena announced. Full disclosure. No more hiding. No more modified diplomats or carefully selected representatives. Humanity reveals its true nature to the galaxy. Panic erupted in the assembly. Delegates shouted over each other. Several species announced their immediate withdrawal from the negotiations. The Krex Mari delegation was already moving toward the exits. In exchange, Elena continued, raising her voice over the chaos. We offer our services as galactic peacekeepers. Human guards at every major negotiation. Human mediators for territorial disputes. Human security forces for trade routes threatened by piracy. We become what we have always been in secret. The apex predator species that keeps the peace through the simple fact of our existence. Supreme Counselor Thexwan called for order, but the shouting continued. It took 10 minutes for the room to quiet down enough for him to speak. Ambassador Vasquez, he said carefully. You are essentially asking us to accept humanity as the unofficial rulers of galactic civilization. To acknowledge that fear of your species should be the foundation of interstellar peace. Not rulers, Elena corrected. Guardians. We have no interest in governing other species or making decisions for them. We want to continue being part of galactic civilization, contributing our knowledge and resources. But we also want to stop pretending to be something we are not. Dr. Yixana stood up from her delegation's section. Her earlier terror had been replaced by scientific curiosity. What guarantees do we have that humanity will not abuse this arrangement? What prevents you from using fear as a tool of oppression, rather than peace? Elena smiled, and for the first time, it was not entirely reassuring. The same thing that has prevented it for the last 50 years. Choice. We choose to be protectors, rather than predators. We choose cooperation over domination. We choose to be better than what evolution made us. But that choice requires respect, she continued. It requires acknowledgement of what we are and what we sacrifice to be part of your civilization. It requires an end to the lies and pretense that diminish us. Ambassador Kethvar, who had been quiet throughout the session, finally spoke up. And if we refuse? If we choose to maintain the current arrangement, or ban humanity from galactic civilization entirely? Elena's expression grew sad but determined. Then you will discover what happens when apex predators decide they no longer wish to be leashed by the comfort of their prey. The threat hung in the air like a physical presence. Not because Elena had made it aggressively, but because everyone in the room now understood the biological reality they were dealing with. For 50 years, humanity had chosen to be gentle. They had chosen to hide their nature, modify their behavior, and pretend to be harmless. But that choice could be revoked. The vote will be held in 24 hours, Supreme Counselor Thexwan announced. All member species will have time to consult with their governments. The options are clear. Accept humanity's new terms. Maintain the current arrangement, or formally exclude them from galactic civilization. As the session ended and delegates filed out, Elena noticed the wide berth they gave her guards. Garcia and Chen remained perfectly still, hands behind their backs, eyes alert but non-threatening. But everyone who passed them walked a little faster. breathed a little more quickly, kept their distance from the polite, professional humans who had chosen not to hunt them. Ambassador HFY approached her as the room emptied. "You have put us in an impossible position," he said quietly. "No," Elena replied. "We have offered you an honest one. For the first time in 50 years, you can make decisions based on truth rather than comfortable lies. And if the truth is too frightening for the galaxy to accept," Elena looked around the empty assembly hall, then back at the Zilithian ambassador, "then you will learn why we chose to hide it in the first place." The next 24 hours would determine the future of galactic civilization, whether it would be built on honest acknowledgement of what humanity was, or whether it would discover what apex predators became when they stopped choosing to be gentle. Either way, the age of pretense was over. The galaxy would finally meet the real human race. The question was whether they would survive the introduction. As Elena walked back to her quarters, flanked by her unmodified guards, she allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. The choice was no longer humanity's burden to bear alone. Now it belonged to everyone. In the end, that was all apex predators had ever wanted. The simple acknowledgement that when they chose not to hunt, it was a gift, not a weakness. The galaxy had 24 hours to decide whether that gift was worth accepting on humanity's terms, or whether they preferred to find out what happened when the gift was withdrawn.